Kansas football has historically been pretty terrible throughout the years. The Jayhawks have been at it since the start of the 20th century, and only 3 times in program history have they managed to finish with 10 or more wins. There was of course that unforgettable 1905 Kansas Jayhawk team that finished 10-1. However, college football is kind of a mess back then. No one was in conferences, so really they won 10 games, but no one cared. 90 years later, Kansas managed to win 10 games again, but that season was sort of marred by the fact that they were only the 4th best team in the Big 8 conference, despite being ranked 8th overall in the AP poll at the end of the season. Unfortunately, their league mate Nebraska won the national championship and was 1st. The Colorado was 5th, and they also finished behind in-state rival Kansas State. So Kansas did win 10 games, but they were really not even the best team in their conference that season. The 2007 team, on the other hand, was I don't want to say excellent team, but they were definitely really good. And that season was remarkable for a number of things. Now, of course, the Jayhawks would eventually end up in the Orange Bowl, beating Virginia Tech for the first time in program history. Things would get a bit sideways from there, but I don't want to go into that. What I want to look at is some of the things you may not remember from that 2007 Kansas Jayhawks season when the team was actually really good. Kansas started the season with a 52-7 blowout win over Central Michigan. On the paper, this just seems like your common P5 over G5 blowout, although we didn't use those terms in 2007. And really that was the case by and large, except for something that happened during the game. In the second quarter, Raymond Pendleton returned a punt 77 yards for a touchdown. He jumped into the end zone and he was flagged for unsportsmanlike conduct. It was kind of a BS penalty by some overzealous ref. However, Kansas head coach Mark Mangino sort of waddled down the sideline, pulled Pendleton aside, gave him a tongue lash. He called him a hot dog a few times, grabbed his face mask. It really sort of overshadowed the result of the game, which was a big win for Kansas, and it became, I don't want to say it was a huge national scandal, but it was on SportsCenter, and it's one of those things that you may have forgotten about that season, but as we'll see later, it was actually a hair-bringer for different stuff that Mangino was doing behind the scenes. There was not a lot of NFL talent on that Kansas Jayhawk roster in 2007. And in fact, the only player who went on to have a successful NFL career was Aqib Talib. Talib put up some really good numbers. He was a consensus All-American in 2007. On the defensive side of the ball, he would finish with 5 picks, including 2 interceptions returned for touchdown. However, they gave him a gadget player role on offense as well, and Talib would finish with 4 receiving touchdowns and 183 receiving yards that season. If you look at the totals Talib had in 2007 for Kansas, he actually had more total touchdowns than Charles Woodson would have in his 1997 Heisman winning campaign. Now, of course, no one was championing Talib to be Heisman, and he was, it wasn't an afterthought because he did finish the season as an All-American and he was a first-round draft pick. But I think we sort of forget about how good Talib was in college and just how multifaceted his game was coming into the NFL that season. So why was Kansas so good in 2007? Look no further than a very soft, fortunate schedule they had. So they played 4 non-conference games that year, and we already mentioned Central Michigan, who finished 8-6 and went to a bowl game that year, but everyone else was soft. They played Toledo team that would finish 5-7. They beat a Florida International side that was 1-11 that year, and then they had a FCS game, although that time it was 1AA, against Southeast Louisiana, who was a 3-8 team at a lower level. So they started the season off 4-0 with momentum, but they hadn't really played anyone up until that point. Moving on to the conference slate in the Big 12, and they were also very, very fortunate when we come to this one. So, as a Big 12 North school, they only played 3 games against Big 12 South opponents. The best Big 12 South teams in 27 were Oklahoma, Texas, and Texas Tech. The 3 teams Kansas didn't play that season. In fact, if you look at the overall strength of that schedule, Kansas only had 2 conference wins against opponents that would have records over 500. Those being a win against Oklahoma State and a win against Texas A&M. Those teams were 7-6. These were not really good teams. These were slightly above average teams. When we look at that schedule, Kansas, it just happened to be their year in terms of having a really easy schedule. Although there was one game, and we're going to get to that right now, that sort of defined this season for them. I still remember this contest very fondly. You had the Kansas Jayhawks, who were number 2 in the AP poll at the time, and it was an incredible story. And on the other side, you had the Missouri Tigers, who were ranked number 3 and led by Chase Daniels. This was a very strange game. College game day, it was played in Arrowhead Stadium, and College game day was there. It was a huge deal. It felt massive, but it also felt like, what the hell is going on here? Kansas and Missouri are kind of playing for a chance to go on to a national title. So here's the story behind the game. It was 2 versus 3. It was a winner-take-all for the Big 12 North and an automatic bid into the Big 12 championship game and a matchup against Oklahoma. Basically, both these teams, if one of them won out, they would play for the national championship. It was looking that way, for certain. The game itself, Kansas crept it back, unfortunately. They were undefeated. They were heading in there with all its momentum, a huge border war rivalry game, and they just stunk it up. They trailed going into the 4th quarter, 28-7. There was a flurry of garbage time activity. The Jayhawks got it down to a 1-score game, but really Mizzou never seemed too threatened, and the final score ended up being 36-28 with Missouri going on. Now, of course, we'll go on to the rest of the story. Mizzou loses against Oklahoma. Kansas gets an at-large bid to the Orange Bowl. And Kansas just ends up on this path of mediocrity. Mizzou's been okay over the past decade or so, but yeah, this was really the most defining game in Kansas Jayhawk history, and boy, did they really screw the pooch on this one. In the years following Kansas's 2007 season, there would be a lot of stories that would come out about head coach Mark Mangino, and basically, the dude was kind of a massive prick. And really, it all goes back to an incident that happened before the 2007 season during summer practices where apparently Mangino just felt like he could park wherever he wanted on campus. And he accumulated a total of 23 parking tickets in the span of a few months for the same exact violation. He was caught parking in a loading zone near the football stadium. A student attendant who was working as a parking monitor would go and ticket him. It became a whole thing. On the 23rd time, Mangino totally big times this kid and goes off on the classic parking ticket tirade of, "Oh, you think you're such a big man?" I'll read the quote here for you because it's pretty impressive. "This job gives you power, does it? You feel real fucking powerful walking around like a big shot, huh? Why in the hell else would you be bothering me with this?" Firstly, he's parking illegally, like he is committing the wrong act here, and to just like treat the student doing his job like a dick, it's really telling in a way, and we saw that with the Pendleton incident as well, where he just totally just treats people poorly. The excuse for Mangino gives also super weak. He basically told the department at the time after this was reported that he was too busy to actually go out and get a parking pass, and that he just didn't want to be bothered with it. It's a weird story even today, and it really, I think, highlights just how big of a prick Mark Mangino was. So despite this fantastic Kansas season where they went 12-1, behind the scenes it was unraveling quick. Obviously, Mangino would be let go after the 2009 season. Eventually, this would lead to Turner Gill, to Charlie Wise. Things would get worse and worse. The Les Miles experiment, and really, Kansas football has been a hot garbage fire since this 2007 season, which was maybe built on the hard work of a massive prick. That does it for the Touchback's look at the 2007 Kansas football season. I'm Cheyenne Hollis, and as always, make sure you #take it out to the 25.